In one of its latest rulings, the Supreme Court acknowledged that amazingly, the First Amendment protects your right to speak and not to speak. Find out more about this common sense yet landmark decision today on Florida Focus. Welcome to Florida Focus, where politics, culture, and a biblical worldview collide. Today, I'm with Aaron DiPietro. Aaron, tell me a little bit about 303 Creatives v. Elenis. Give me some background on this case.
Yeah, thank you, Noah, for this is awesome to talk about this landmark and extremely exciting case. So 303 Creative is the website design and graphic company for Lori Smith, who is a small business owner and a Christian website designer and graphic artist from Colorado. She had, fairly successful business that she wanted to expand into the wedding website design and graphic industry. A problem was the state of Colorado had a anti-discrimination proposal that could actually penalize her and force her to participate in promoting same-sex weddings and other websites that would be communicating messages that violated her conscience, that violated her faith, basically. And she could get fined and penalized tremendously for that. So what she did was she used a pre-enforcement lawsuit to basically appeal to the courts to say, hey, I would like to, move forward in this, but I feel like me exercising my freedom of conscience and my, expanding my business could subject me to being penalized and targeted by the government and forced to participate in compelled speech that I disagree with. So she sued, went to all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and in a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court came down with a landmark decision in her favor.
So I know that was a lot of confusion about what was going on. Was, a lot of people were like, well, there's no person that requested her services. So who is this lawsuit against, kind of thing?
Correct.
So that definitely clears that up.
Mm-hmm.
So what are opponents of this saying? What are people who are against this ruling talking about right now?
Yeah, so including, basically all the way from the CNN pundits all the way up to even the dissent in the Supreme Court, led by Sonia Sotomayor, basically are accusing the majority for creating a right to discrimination. Just blatantly basically calling people of faith and those that believe in traditional marriage and religious freedom and as bigots, haters, homophobes, and basically that this is just creating a right to discrimination. Basically, we're creating like the new Jim Crow standards for in regards to this area. And all we're basically saying in response to that was talked about by the majority is that this is protecting freedom of speech. Freedom of speech goes both ways in all different directions. I think the majority decision, which was written by Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, I think he said it beautifully when talking about in the dissent, or I'm sorry, in the majority of opinion, that under the Colorado law, which the non-discrimination law, quote unquote, and I'm quoting from the majority opinion, in a world like that, governments could force an unwilling Muslim movie director to make a Zionist or film with a Zionist message. They could compel an atheist muralist to accept a commission celebrating evangelical zeal. And they could require a gay website designer to create websites for a group advocating against same-sex marriage, so long as these speakers accept commissions from the public with different messages. Perhaps the dissent finds these possibilities untroubling because it trusts state governments to coerce only enlightened, quote unquote, speech. But if that is the calculation, it is a dangerous one indeed. And I think to this point, this law would basically force anyone that is open for business to basically offer their services to any individual whatsoever, whether they agree with it or not. And we have to understand free speech has to go both ways. Everyone has to have the right to speak and to not speak as well.
So a lot of people are saying this is removing protections from minority groups, but this is really giving protections to people to stand up for their beliefs and say, I don't necessarily agree with this, and I'm not providing a product. It's like an artist, right?
Correct.
Shouldn't be forced to paint something obscene that he doesn't want to paint, right? We would never mandate an artist paint something he doesn't want to paint. So I think I think it's really interesting. So what does this mean going forward? Where does this kind of branch off to in the grassroots movement for freedom of speech?
Yeah, well, so I think across the board, it's going to create basically protection for freedom of speech across the board, saying that everyone has the right to be able to engage in speech they would choose to, and also to decline to not engage in speech that they choose to. I think on one level, across the board, we have a lot of SOGI ordinances, sexual orientation, gender identity laws, that basically are touted as non-discrimination laws that, in essence, as the majority in 303 created determined, really is a weaponization of discrimination, allowing government entities to punish and penalize people of faith, small business owners, florists, cake makers, website designers, photographers, forcing them to participate in compelled speech that violates their conscience. This case will say, no, the line has been drawn in the sand. Free speech is protected across the board. So this will definitely provide massive protection and, in essence, kind of undermined the enforcement of a lot of these discriminatory acts against small business owners and people of faith, and make sure that people are protected across the board.
Yeah, so it seems like this is protecting more people than the original idea that you were compelled to do something for the protection. So, is it better to be compelled to do something that you don't agree with? And in the people who are, let's use a church, for example. The church wants an atheist to paint a picture of Christ. Well, the church gets what they want, but the person who is an atheist doesn't. Is it better that only one party is being able to exercise freedom of speech, or is it better just to give it to all parties, which is what this case did?
Correct. And I think the Supreme Court ruled in their last line of the majority opinion. I think they beautifully summed it up with the statement that the First Amendment envisions the United States as a rich and complex place where all persons are free to think and speak as they wish, not as the government demands. That's the beauty of our pluralistic society. And the idea as well that they talked about is liberty. The idea. A commitment to free speech, and this was the majority in Neil Gorsuch's ruling. He said a commitment to speech for only some messages and some persons is no commitment at all. By approving a government's effort to eliminate disfavored ideas, quote unquote, today's dissent is emblematic of an unfortunate tendency by some to defend First Amendment values only when they find the speaker's message sympathetic. But if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. That's the right of everyone to speak things that others disagree with, and the right to refrain from communicating messages that they choose not to say. It's basic freedom of speech. Only in totalitarian regimes should the government have the right, or does the government, they should not have the right, but only in totalitarian regimes does the government have, do we see governments forcing their citizens to speak under threat of jail time or fines and penalties, and it's absolutely ridiculous that this has to even be a case before the Supreme Court. You think this would be a basic bottom line thing, and the thing is, it protects everyone. It protects everyone.
Right. Yeah, I think that quote really sums up. I mean, what we've seen from most people on the radical left is tolerance, but only for things they want tolerance for. Right. As soon as you're talking about Christianity or anything like that, you are no longer given the benefit of tolerance. Right. And it's always that one-sided rules for thee, but not for me movement. And this really does provide a huge class of protections for everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited that this Supreme Court ruling happened.
It's exciting to see the progression that the court is taking in defending religious liberty. This is kind of a part 2 case from, if a lot of people may remember, the Jack Phillips case, the masterpiece cake shop, where cake artist Jack Phillips was taken to the Supreme Court, or had to take his case to the Supreme Court because he was not designing a custom designed cake celebrating a same-sex wedding. And back in 2018, the Supreme Court held that the Colorado had violated the free exercise clause. So this case actually expands that. So that case was very narrowly decided in terms of the breadth. It was a strong majority, 7-2, but it was narrow in the coverage that it provided. This legislation is expanding that to not only cover the free exercise clause of religion, but also the free speech case as well. So it's basically providing additional protections for both freedom of religion and freedom of speech, because there are people out there, Noah, that don't necessarily have religious views on a particular topic, but they still have their convictions on free speech. For instance, like on the whole gender identity movement, there are atheists out there that don't agree with the transgender movement. They believe that there are only two sexes, male and female, and they don't want to be forced to communicate messages that violate their belief in science. So they shouldn't be forced, even if they don't have a religious defense for, not participating in compelled speech. They should still have the right. In this case, again, expands protections of freedom of speech for everyone within the business world, saying that we are a diverse and society, and everyone should be protected to not violate their conscience by being forced to participate in compelled speech.
Absolutely. Well, I hope this cleared up a lot of the confusion about this case. And there was a lot of propaganda going on around trying to create mass confusion about what this case entailed for people's rights. I hope that this gave some insight into what this case actually did and how it's going to benefit everybody. Aaron, thank you so much for sitting down to discuss this. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week on Florida Focus.